Now it's a very great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of this session. When it comes to digital change, you haven't seen nothing yet. So are the words of a very successful businesswoman, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and member of the House of Lords in the United Kingdom. She sits on the board of prominent brands such as Twitter. So, ladies and gentlemen, she has a unique insight to the agenda of the digital world. Please welcome, from the United Kingdom, Martha Lane Fox.
Thank you. Welcome. Hi. Hello. You may not know who I am, but someone reminded me in the street the other day in London. It doesn't happen very often, but I was walking along and someone shouted, "I know who you are." And I was thinking, brilliant, this hasn't happened for a while. I was famous for a very short period of time. They looked at me and they said, "You're that .com dinosaur." I was like, oh my God, I'm 44, I'm not a dinosaur. But then actually, they are right, because I've worked in technology and the internet my whole working life. And anyone who's seen the internet go from pretty much nothing in Europe to where it is now, I think could probably be called a dinosaur. So I wanted to share with you my perspectives over that 20 years, why I think that we really are only entering the beginning of the hyper change, and a little bit of advice perhaps for the future. So back when we started lastminute.com in 1997, I was 25, just in case you wondered, we were thinking we were pretty clever. Brent and I, my co-founder, had spotted this opportunity. Well, he'd spotted it really, because he spent his Friday nights, and I know because I was his minion in the office, organizing dates for his girlfriends. His wife doesn't like it when I tell this story, so I'm sorry, Jen, but it is true. Came out of a very personal user need. He'd spend hours calling restaurants, ringing hotels, working out if there was a spare room. And when we were both working on projects together, because we worked in a consulting company looking at the internet, he was suddenly completely aware that this incredible tool would make amassing a lot of inventory at very, very high speeds, all at the last minute, a lot easier. And as a happy byproduct, it would make his life a lot easier too. So he asked me to come and join him, and we started our business. Now, I don't know if you much remember the internet in 1997, but it seems kind of extraordinary that at that time there was no Google, there was no Facebook, there was hardly even a 2G network in the UK, let alone anything else. And we thought that we'd spotted this huge, amazingly new, exciting world that was about to rapidly descend on all of us. And we worked very hard over the next 10 years to build our business and make it a success. We got some things right, we got some things very wrong indeed. And I was laughing actually when I saw the title, Speed of Change, because the kind of common wisdom about the internet is that the quicker you change things, keep moving, keep adding new products, the better the product will be. But I needed to share with you one anecdote that I felt very personally when that can go wrong extremely badly. We were very quick to copy the best of what was happening in US websites. We didn't have very much money. We were working on a shoestring. We didn't even have very many people in our tech team. So it was often easier for Amazon to do the hard work and lastminute.com to copy it. This was generally a pretty good strategy, except one time when we just released our one-click fast buy function. Who could possibly imagine that the fast buy function might not be good for customers? Put in all your details, bought something before, bing, buy it again. Well, nothing really seemed to be wrong with this until about 3 weeks after we put the feature live. We'd had lots of positive feedback from our customers. And then Justin came and stood beside my desk, who ran customer services, and said to me, "You have to deal with this customer. I know you like the really difficult ones. He has shouted at me for about 25 minutes. And I was thinking, can't be that bad. Pass him over. Took the phone. I was sworn at. Terrible swear words for about 3 minutes. Okay, what's going on here? And after a while, I realized that it was the fast buy function that was creating the panic. Couldn't work out why until It wasn't the same holiday with the same details that he was going on this time. Previously, he had been with his family on a very nice package holiday to Mallorca. Let's just say this time it wasn't with his family and the tickets had been sent to his wife. So speed is good, but just take care. Fast forward now to 2017, and I still can't quite believe that so many things have shifted so fast. Many things are different, but many things seem extraordinary. Back in 97, 98, one of the reasons I was incredibly excited by this brave new world was that it felt like a time that was going to be more democratic, redistributive, new voices were going to emerge, more entrepreneurialism, more opportunity for people to be empowered. And to a degree, that's been true. It would be hard to argue that technology hadn't unleashed the capacity for more people to do more things than ever before. But I am also constantly struck by some of the things that haven't quite happened as I imagined. And perhaps the biggest of those are the huge numbers of people who don't use technology. Might sound perverse, but it's easy to forget that actually half the world is not connected to the internet. And even in my own country, the UK, there are 13 million adults in a population of around 60 million adults who never use technology, and about another 10 million who only have very basic skills. I believe there's a huge prize for the company, organization, or country that puts this right at the heart of its strategy. I do believe that's as true for a corporate as it is for a country. Now is a time when every single employee or citizen should understand and use the power of this technology. The internet is the organizing principle of our age, and yet we are not yet organized around it. You may have a business or an organization that doesn't work purely in technology, but everything is being affected by it. And I believe as leaders, one of the most important priorities isn't just to have a chief digital officer, quite the opposite. You should be the chief digital officer. You must put a deep understanding of technology at the heart of your organization. Technology is speeding up. The internet is not going away. It's going to become more important, not less. And by understanding the internet, a digital understanding, I don't mean being able to code, although that would be fantastic. I mean being able to see the adapting, quick-changing world and use it and feel it yourself. That's different to shopping on the internet or even using a Twitter handle. It's about realizing how quickly things are moving and building an organization that is resilient and adaptive. And it's really hard. But there is a huge prize if we do so. I have some experience of this at scale. I was lucky enough to be involved in a huge shift in how the government in the UK used digital technology. We changed the entire way that the civil service and citizens use the internet and the interactions that happen. We took some terrible government websites with awful services and we made them much better, launched something called gov.uk. Now, this only could happen because the Prime Minister at the time got it. He didn't understand everything about the internet, but he did understand that a digital future was going to be the only future that we would have. And not just him, but the leaders in the civil service, both ministerial and also the civil servants that served them. I think that CEOs in every organization can learn from this. It has to come from the top. I believe that you must educate yourself and bring your workforce on with you. It never stops. It's a lifelong learning of digital. I don't know everything, and I've worked in this sector my whole life. So that's the first thing, the gap between the pace of things happening and the understanding that we have. And I think it's up to leaders and CEOs to close that gap. But the second thing is equally important, and that's about designing for inclusive growth. The internet is designed by men. It's as simple as that. About 5% of the world's software engineers are women. Only about 17% of leaders are women, and about 23% of the whole sector. That is worse than the House of Lords, a 500-year-old institution in the UK. This is important because if you appreciate that more diverse teams build better products, which I think is now generally accepted in the mainstream corporate world, then you will believe that you will have a massive competitive advantage if you involve women in the design of this new world products. It doesn't have to just be at the hard edge coding end, but it must be through the chain. I'll give you an example. Apple, when it released its health kit, widely touted, on your phone, packed in was all of these incredible tools that could monitor every aspect of your health. How many steps you'd taken, what your heart rate was doing, how your sugar levels were, what your exercise was. Except if you're a woman and you happen to have periods or be going through the menopause. Nothing. No product to have any relation to women's health. And why was that? Because there were no women on the design team. Now, clearly, having more women involved at that design stage would have led to a better product. They wouldn't have had to recall it, reissue it, the cost that goes alongside this. I bet there are examples in all of your organizations where a more inclusive design process, particularly if you're doing anything with technology, will lead to better products. And the final thing, which I believe so deeply will build a better and more robust future, is about social and responsible and ethical technology. It's sobering to think that the entire European technology sector is only 7% of that of the US's. 7%. And this is the most rapidly growing chunk of the economy in pretty much most developed countries. We are still, together, only 7%. So I constantly think about how else can we separate the new world in our countries, here in Europe, from those coming from the US. And one thing I would suggest is by building much stronger values and ethics into our technology. And again, that has to come from leaders. And that's about maybe different relationships to data between companies and their users. Definitely more diversity and gender balance and other balance of all kinds of voices. Maybe also about how communities get served, underserved communities, social problems get addressed. I think that's how we could differentiate ourselves here in Europe. We're never going to be able to build quite the same level of economic power as the US and clearly China, but there may be other things we can use to our advantage. So here we are now in 2017. I believe if digital understanding is at the top of leaders' priorities, if we build for more inclusive growth and we put ethics and social responsibility at our core values, then we'll have a good shot of the future. And that future, I believe, is still very exciting. Yes, it's speeding up. Yes, it's still scary in many ways. How do we teach children about technology? What does it mean for those left behind? How on earth can we navigate the pace of change? But my goodness me, I would rather be living now than any other time. Think of how we can talk to each other across the world. Think of the friends that we can make, virtual and real. Think of the ways that we can spread information to positive effect, not just negative. So I am hugely optimistic, but we need to grab it. And I urge you, as business leaders, political leaders, corporate leaders of every kind, to put the internet at the heart of your strategies. It's not easy, but it is important, and it will be worth it. The internet is the organizing principle of our age. Let's get organized around it. Thank you.
Martha, you have an impressive resume, and I'd like to start out with Twitter.
Yes.
And I'd like to show you one of your most loyal customers. He's up here.
I think I know what he might look like.
Here he is, Twitter Trump. He has made this platform his, let's say, preferable way of communicating. What has Trump mean to Twitter, let's say, in regards of publicity?
Well, I think it would be very hard to argue that it wasn't an incredible time that we live in when you can have a fast track into the leader of the free world's brain. And Jack Dorsey, who's the co-founder of Twitter, says this all the time. Taking away the politics, whatever you feel about it, the fact that you have this stream of consciousness and you can see in sort of, as much as you can, inside his brain is an incredible thing. And this is the world that we are now facing, where we have this capacity to have a completely different kind of conversation. So I don't know, I wonder whether we'll look back and think it's better or worse, or whether it just is, and now this is the world that we have to work around.
I touched upon this fact earlier today when we had Randy Zuckerberg on stage in regards of Facebook and responsibility. What do you think about responsibility? If you have a world leader using Twitter, and sometimes, let's just say, his version of the truth is a bit off from the version I have. So how do you cope with that on Twitter?
It's an extremely difficult question, and I think one of the things that I have learnt while going to board meetings in San Francisco, which many of you may know better than me, is the kind of core sense of freedom of expression in America is different even to my own experience of the UK or perhaps somewhere in Europe. I feel there are boundaries to freedom of expression, and yet when it is a constitutional right to express yourself, it has a different kind of set of issues around it. So I think that's one thing to bear in mind in how Twitter was constructed originally. And, many of us say things that might be slightly fake news, but we're not all leader of the free world. Twitter couldn't possibly step in and stop Trump speaking for no other reason than it wasn't quite a version of the truth. There are so many positive counterbalancing facts to the way Twitter is used by people who need to have that platform, who maybe are being persecuted or don't have any route to have a conversation where they're revealing something that is important. And I think that on balance, the way that the platform clamps down on the abusive and the violent and the clearly illegal stuff is right, and it shouldn't encroach too much on things that some of us, particularly perhaps the metropolitan liberal elite, might find a bit less appealing.
And Marta, when speaking of freedom of speech, I'd like to show you this hashtag. It's a customer on Twitter, and Twitter got a pretty unusual request from the Trump administration. This guy or girl, we don't know who it is, has been, let's say, very critical towards the traveling ban, also known as the Muslim ban. And the Trump administration has actually demanded that Twitter should give up the real identity. Yeah. And I know that you replied with sue, that you're suing Trump and the administration.
Yes.
What importance does such a, let's say, a case have for Twitter, but also for other companies?
I think that it was a moment I was proud to be a board member of Twitter. It wasn't a board decision, it was absolutely Jack's decision. And he was right, because one of the very important central tenets, as I said, is that freedom of expression for many people to get voices out that would not otherwise be able to. And when I first joined the board, one of the things that Jack cited as a moment he really could see suddenly the kind of power and the flare going across the world that Twitter could provoke was during the Arab Spring. Now, obviously, politically, extremely complicated situation, but it is definitely true that that capacity to have lifted people's voices using Twitter was an extraordinary thing to behold, and you only needed to follow some of the content and the footage coming out of countries, Egypt, Tunisia, different places, to see the power of that. So, it's very, very central to the way Twitter thinks about the world, that you should be open. It's not a closed network. It's not Facebook. That's not a dig at Facebook. It's just a different philosophy. Sure. It's not about your network. You can follow anyone as long as they're open, which a huge majority of people are, and you can talk to them. And we have recently put in tools where you can mute people, or you can dampen people if they're being abusive, which is quite right, but it is still a central kind of conversation. And that's extremely powerful, and that is something that is, an absolute red line in the company. So it was totally the right decision to sue.
And I will follow this issue with great interest. It's very important. If we look at how Twitter is doing in the social media world, I just have a chart here I'd like to show you. In regards of social media use,
I've seen this one.
When we talk about social use and media growth, Twitter is struggling to keep up. How do you see the future for Twitter? You're quite new there, but how do you see the future?
Well, it's clearly not the director's job to write the strategy, and certainly not in stage in front of a couple of thousand people.
Oh, so well, just do it.
Bad luck.
They won't tell.
Bad luck. They love it when directors do that. I'm an avid user of Twitter. I think it's phenomenal. I think that it has an incredible opportunity to continue to be the place where conversations happen about live world news, global news. You know, the fact that I can follow something that Black Lives Matter has created in the US, or if something is happening in a part of the world where you'd never be able to normally reach. You know, I've made connections through my work on Twitter. I've used it for personal reasons. It's, to me, an astonishingly powerful tool. But, you know, you're right, the user numbers did stagnate a bit. They are growing again now, and Jack's product plan, I think, is going to continue to improve it incrementally every month. So I'm positive there's still growth in Twitter, absolutely. And I'm happy, a few people here have told me that Denmark is not an avid user of Twitter, so here we go, a good growth market.
And this has quite the interest of the audience, because you see, the most popular question right now is, how does Twitter survive the next decennium? And I'd just like to add to this, because since it went public in 2013, it has lost, I think, annual something about $500 million per year. You have Facebook and you have Google, who does almost like a stalker jobs in regards of ad and so forth. What will be Twitter's sweet spot? How will you make money?
Yeah, well, to just re-emphasize Jack's stated strategy, you know, he believes that there is an opportunity to be the live news network of the world. There is nowhere else to go for live news. You know, I was recently in Parliament when we had a terrorist attack on the building, and a maniac, you know, hardly terrorism.
You were there?
Yes, I was there.
Oh,
it was
horrible.
It is, but you have to keep these things in context to me. It was one lone crazy person.
Crazy person, yeah.
And yet Twitter was where all of the information was coming out, both from inside, outside. I was in the building not knowing very much because we were all locked in our offices, and using Twitter to find out what was happening. There is no other place to be. That is very powerful. You just have to keep going back to the product. I believe that's a need that we've discovered that people want. You know, it's something now I can't imagine us not having. So is there a business in there? Of course there is. Is there a business?
It's a bit like with Snapchat, right? When it went on here, you know, the expectation is high, but still they don't know how to make money. But everybody thinks they will. Yeah. So you see the same for Twitter?
Yeah, I think it will absolutely work through. You know, we haven't begun to tap into the potential, both advertising, potential subscription, all the other models that we can invent. So I'm confident.
And if we should just give them an advice, let's say that someone out there is sitting with a brilliant idea, someone in sort of social media, and you say, how do you think of how to make money? When you were in the dot adventure back in the early days, when do you actually know this is it? Here it is. This is going to be a cash cow.
I wish I had a good answer for that. You know, again, my experience is that you just start from a user need. You know, I don't believe you can successfully build something that you don't feel. I think that you have to be a product user, owner, driver, and that is why Jack is a brilliant CEO of Twitter. That's why Brent was great at lastminute.com. You need to come from a place where you say, I get this, I use it, I know what it feels like and should be. Start with that, and I believe the money will follow. But also, just to go back to your question about what can you learn from Twitter, I think that the thing that I feel amazed by is just the way that it has opened up transparency in relationships. So any CEO in this room should be using Twitter to talk to their employees, whether they want people to be able to have an anonymous conversation with them or not. Anybody who is running an organization can use social media to have a complete fast track into what people are thinking in a way that was impossible before, because you can have that anonymity, you can have that direct conversation, and that is a very powerful tool if you use it well.
And to stay put on one of the cornerstone, that the internet has to be at the core of everything. I'd just like to talk about perception. We all heard that. Perception is king, but perception takes seconds. And I'd just like to show you a little clip that went viral this year. Let's just see it.
Happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
Tired of this.
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
Every time.
My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies.
I think I've seen this, I don't know, 50 times. I still find it so amusing. Just,
way
you know,
she's
this
so
is his wife, and I'm thinking Navy
crawling
SEALs
out.
and SWAT teams, they must be so jealous. I haven't seen an extraction team this efficient
I agree.
ever. Well,
Brilliant. I have twins. They're identical boys, about the same age as the one in the crawler. I can imagine them hurtling.
it will be you next.
Yes.
The reason I bring this up is how should companies think about perception in a digital era where social media is king?
I think it goes back to something I touched on at the end of my speech, which is about responsibility and ethical nature of what I think you should put at the heart of your businesses. To me, you can't hide now. You have to have the right values. And all of these kind of clashes and PR disasters happen when you're not living those right values. You're trying to be something that the company is not. So authenticity and having a real identity is so vital, because this is an age when things are not opaque anymore, and we know from every angle that both young people coming into the workforce want to work for companies where they feel they have transparent beliefs and they are companies that live what they really say. We know that customers more and more want to feel like they understand what people's values are, and social media is part of this. You know, you can't say we are a company that stands for integrity and we always answer our customers, and then have a Twitter handle where you've got 5,000 customers, all complaints, and you haven't answered them. So you've got to match what is internal and what is external, and the easiest way to do that, in my experience, is to be it.
Martha, let's have another question from the audience, and the one with the most votes right now is this one, is from Martin. Let's see here. It says, why do governments have a ministry for economics, finance, etc., and do not have a ministry for digital development? Good question.
That is a good question, but I am going to pick you up a bit, because in the UK we sort of do. Where are you in the audience? I can't see. Direct my answer somewhere. I still can't see, but anyway. Oh, there, hello. I agree with you. I think that, again, it goes a little bit back to what I was saying, that somehow I feel organizations outsource digital. I saw that a little bit in some of the corporate boards I've sat on where, well, we've got a digital officer, it's all fine now. When actually the problem was that the CEO didn't really get digital and the board didn't get digital, and actually you need to have all those things joined up. So I completely agree with you. And what we built in the heart of the UK government was something called the Government Digital Service. It sat new department reporting to the most senior member of the civil service, and ultimately the Prime Minister, was building the digital products, but also trying to steer some of the digital strategy internally, sure, not externally, you know, infrastructure and all the things for the country, but it was a bit of a shift. So I agree with you, it's got to be all joined up. And you've reminded me that I did a bit of research about FTSE 100 boards recently, and guess how many digital executives there are on FTSE 100 boards? Just shout a guess.
I'll take a guess. 5? I don't know.
You're right.
Really?
6
6?
on all of the FTSE 100 boards.
Whoa. That's
So,
unbelievable.
you know, you heard it here first, but the FTSE 100 is over.
Whoa. We have time for one more question from the audience before we head to my cue cards again. And it's in regards of Twitter, and it says, Instagram is Twitter in pictures, and moving pictures are the future. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting one of the challenges, I guess. I don't quite see it like that. You know, I think you have different modes. And for me, I love Instagram, but I don't use it for my work. I don't know where you are. Sorry, again, I can't see you. I use Instagram for my family, for my friends, to bore about books I've read, pictures of my identical twins doing crazy stuff like that video. And I use Twitter for tweeting articles that I found interesting, having conversations. So I think it is a very different thing. But, you know, again, Twitter recognized early on that video is very important, bought Periscope, a very brilliant live video business, and has integrated that into the platform. So I think we are merging more and more, but I do think they have different user needs.
Let's just go back to one of the points you mentioned in your presentation, gender equality. Today in the audience, we have quite a lot of women here, and I just like...
Quite.
Sorry?
Quite.
I'm trying. Well, I'd just like to touch upon this point, and of course I have a little clip on this as well, because I like this. But let's just have a look at it. I'll explain it afterwards. It might seem familiar.
The question now is, how do people respond to their scandals?
For the wider region, I think one of your children has just walked in, but I mean, shifting sands in the region, do you think relations with the North may change?
It's unclear at the moment what effect former President Geun-hye's impeachment will have on the territories. Unfortunately, discontent in South Korea is not only related to President Geun-hye's administration.
Okay.
This is a major embarrassment for South Korea, who often criticises the North of corruption, and who now find themselves in the middle of a massive corruption case themselves.
Sorry, you do look rather busy there.
Yes. And this clip goes on. In a little while, she's going to, do something with a bomb and all of that. I find this a little bit condescending, of course, towards the men, but also very funny, because when we talk about our ability to multitask, and you talked about how the scarcity of women in this industry. So what does it take? Because it's not the men keeping us out saying you can't be part of the team. So how do we...
Sometimes it is.
Maybe sometimes it is.
No, sometimes it is, and that's now pretty statistically clear.
It is?
I think...
Then I better ask you, how do we fix that? How do we make sure that there will be a larger gender equality, because their product out there will probably be better, like you said?
Yeah, I mean, it's so fundamental to me, and this isn't about anything more than just building a equal society in the future. If you believe that the digital economy is going to be more and more of the economy, powered by the internet, and that seems pretty incontrovertible, it is profoundly upsetting to anybody, men and women, that the old hierarchies have been replicated like that. The internet sector, the digital sector, did not exist 30 years ago, and yet, as I said, it has a lower percentage of women than the House of Lords. So this really is something that we need to think about very carefully as employers, designers, leaders of any shape and form. And I think there are many, many different levels on which it needs to be attacked. I think that governments need to make more active interventions, starting at school for sure, but we can't wait that long. So I think there are more...
But if we take something concretely, like Silicon Valley, so how do you get a ticket in as a woman? What could make it easier than it is today?
Well, I think that, again, is about breaking some of the networks. Silicon Valley is the ultimate network, and it's not because they're all bad people at all. A lot of them are extraordinary and remarkable and amazingly resilient and extraordinary people, but there is no doubt that the network is incredibly tight, and it comes from a very small pool of the world, and often from a couple of business schools, and often because you hire people that look a bit like you, and all of a sudden you've got 5 guys starting the most successful companies in the world, and their networks are just reinforcing all those hierarchies. So those different challenges are hard to answer, but Silicon Valley is only one bit of the world. I think that everybody who has a business has a tech part now of that business, and it's worth looking in. I look back to history for inspiration. There was a brilliant woman in the 1980s in the UK called Dame Stephanie Shirley. She started a software company. She was one of the first computer engineers, and she employed only women, only working from home, and working on things like coding the black box for Concorde. So not lightweight work. And I see her every now and then. I think she's about 150 now, although she looks about 70. And she says to me, "What happened? We were doing so well. We did this flexible working, employing women, working on really hard problems, and we've gone massively backwards."
I'm just wondering, I didn't do this research. I have to do it open research, as we say. How many women is on the board at Twitter?
Well, before me, only 1, but now there are 4 of us.
So we're getting there.
Progress, yeah.
I'd just like to move a bit along because we don't have so much time left. I just want to talk about personal leadership. Everybody knows that you're walking with a stick.
Yes.
And I know you had a horrible accident that kind of changed your life, but also your way of thinking. What did that teach you?
Yeah, I did have a bad accident. I spent 2 years in hospital, and I think, people look for these moments of huge shock that suddenly make you think about something over here that you'd never thought about. For me personally, I think it taught me anything. It taught me 2 things. It reinforced what I thought was important already, which are my friends and my family, and I would be dead if I hadn't had the support and love of them. So that is a humbling and sobering thing to feel in your mid-30s, to suddenly need to have those networks like you needed when you're a little baby, really. But the second thing is just about kind of resilience. If I want to pass on one thing to my boys, it is to be strong and kind, but resilient, and to not feel like every knock is a big knock, to keep trying to be positive and to be kind and to keep thinking about your small contribution to the world.
And we're already there with the 3 for all questions that all the speakers get. Well, thank you for those words. I'll keep those in mind. But what is the one characteristic that you believe every leader should possess?
I think self-awareness is the thing that I would say, and I think self-awareness doesn't just come from you knowing yourself, but from actually listening to what people are saying about you. And that is very hard. I guess it's, high emotional intelligence with high other bits of intelligence. But those great leaders that I respect have that capacity to be humble, be wrong, listen to people around them.
And what is the one mistake you often witness leaders make more frequently than others?
I think that it's thinking they've connected with what's happening in their organization when they really haven't. And I think it's quite easy to do a tour of a shop floor or walk around a factory and chat to someone on a production line or in a shop or in your staff and think, I know what's going on, they're all happy. And perhaps back to self-awareness, not really to have tested that cultural mood and to know really where the organization is going.
And if you should leave the audience with one piece of advice that has been very important in your life, what would that be?
I think be bold. I really love Goethe, and he has a wonderful quotation, which is, boldness has genius, power and magic to it. And even if boldness is a small act of boldness, I think it is our capacity as human beings to do bold things. So I urge boldness.
Thank you for your boldness. Ladies and gentlemen, Martha Lane Fox.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.